next guest, Santa Cruz Police Chief Andrew Mills, took a knee with demonstrators in his city on Saturday. That was all it took to make news across our country. He's also making a public plea to get policing back on track. For more, we are happy tonight to be joined by the police chief for Santa Cruz, California, Andrew Mills. Chief, talk about what went into your decision and what you learned in that simple act of taking a knee.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here and to talk about what's happening in Santa Cruz and many other cities across the country. The mayor, the person kneeling to my right, Justin Cummins, and I were just talking and discussing, the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a very peaceful protest. And when that time came for everybody to take a knee, it felt right. I'd already determined in my mind that I wanted to take a knee to show my stance on what we need to do in policing to get things back on track. Secondly, I also wanted to send a message to my community that we're all in this together, that we can de-escalate this. We don't have to have riot gear and helmets and bats and batons, that we can do this in a very peaceful way. And then a message to my department that we are part of the community, not separate from it, not above it, not to police it, but to work with our community in order to bring justice for everybody, including people of color and people who are undervalued in many ways in our community. So just kind of an organic thing that just happened spur of the moment.
How is your community? How are your streets? And how is your department? Here in the New York area, for example, NYPD is working 12s mostly, 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off in some cases. And with the tempo of this, a lot of big city departments especially are getting good and tired.
Yeah, so our community is doing fabulous. We have not had any act of violence. And we've been very fortunate that our community values peace, and it has really made us proud that they've determined that they would do a peaceful protest up to this point, and we think and we believe that will continue. We have not moved to 12-hour shifts at this point. We have deployed some overtime to make sure we have adequate staffing to meet any problems that might come. But we just got off a long term of 12-hour shifts because of COVID-19. And now we've had the opportunity to go back to our normal shifts. And so it's working well for us right now, but we're keeping a very close eye on it, as you might imagine.
How do good cops answer for bad cops? I believe it was yesterday we had a live television news audience watching in Australia, their correspondent and camera person in Lafayette Square in Washington, as was our own Garrett Hake, as were correspondents from other networks and publications, when the call just went out. The signal went out around 6:35 p.m. Eastern time to move, and it got rough and it got violent, and all of Australia saw a police officer just aim a roundhouse punch at the cameraman. There have been protests filed over it. Say nothing of what has us here, the taking of a life at the hands of police in the Twin Cities. So back to my lengthy and wordy start of this question, how do good cops answer for bad cops?
Well, Brian, we've got to do a lot better. We have been way too slow as a profession to make sure that we're cleaning our own house. But I can tell you this, that most of the sustained allegations that we get in for IA investigations, internal affairs investigations, come from other police officers inside the organization. And I think that has to continue, it has to increase. But we have a little mantra here, and that is, if you see it, you own it. You can no longer say that's somebody else's responsibility, it wasn't me. If you were there, it was just as though you did it if you didn't intervene and stop excessive use of force. And I read an article just recently that over 100 journalists have been hit with rounds and have been injured as a part of this coverage of this protest. That can't happen in a free world. The press needs to be free, needs to film us, needs to hold us accountable, and do it fairly. But at the same time, the police have to do their part to make sure that happens.
Chief Andrew Mills, we wish you well, Chief. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us live tonight. Be safe, be well.
Thank you so much.